warehouse offers. Same hourly rate on paper. One worker feels stable and says, "I can finally breathe a little." The other is calling the agency after week 1, saying, "This is not what I signed up for." That gap right there is what we're talking about today. Paycheck versus real pay. You're listening to Workers.com Staffing Pulse, insights from the front line. I'm Jennifer, a personnel manager who spent a lot of time in manufacturing plants and warehouses trying to help both sides land on pay that actually works in real life.
And I'm Sam, staffing manager, usually the one on the phone when someone says, "Wait, why is my check lower than I expected?" Today, we're going beyond that single number everyone fixates on, the hourly rate.
Exactly. We're not giving financial advice here. We're not talking budgets or investing. We're talking about understanding job offers in industrial and light industrial work so employers can be clearer and job seekers don't get surprised by that first paycheck.
So if you're a hiring manager, recruiter, or you're comparing warehouse or production roles yourself, stay with us. Because the way you talk about pay or the questions you ask about pay is a big part of whether a job actually feels worth it week to week.
Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with that scenario you opened with, Jennifer. 2 jobs, same posted rate. Walk us through what that really looks like.
Sure. Imagine 2 forklift roles, both advertised at $18 an hour. Job A is on a steady 40-hour schedule, Monday through Friday, same shift, very occasional overtime, but it's announced in advance. Job B is technically also $18 an hour, but the schedule swings. Some weeks it's 32 hours, some weeks it's 50. Lots of last-minute texts asking, "Can you stay late? Can you come in early?"
On paper, they look identical. Same rate, same general type of work. But the worker in Job A is saying, "I know what my check will roughly be. I can plan around it." The worker in Job B might be thinking, "If I say no to all this surprise overtime, my hours drop. If I say yes, I'm exhausted."
Right. And for employers and staffing pros, when we only sell the hourly rate, it's $18 an hour. It's a great rate. We gloss over the parts that actually shape someone's real pay. Consistent hours, schedule, shift, commute, and whether overtime is a nice bonus or a survival strategy.
And that's where frustration comes from, on both sides. Employers say, "We're paying a fair rate. Why is turnover so high?" Job seekers say, "I took the higher paying job and I still feel like I'm behind." It's not always because the number is wrong. It's because the picture around the number is fuzzy.
I see this play out as no-shows and fast quits. Someone accepts a role thinking, "I'll be full-time with steady checks." And then they learn the hard way that they're actually getting 30 hours most weeks, unless they're constantly available for extra shifts. When reality doesn't match what they imagined, trust breaks down fast.
And once trust is gone, it doesn't matter how good the base rate is. They're mentally checking out, or they're already back on job boards during lunch.
So let's switch gears and talk about what employers and staffing pros can do differently. How do we explain compensation in a way that feels honest and clear without needing a calculator on the phone?
I like simple frameworks, so here's one I use when I'm training new recruiters. Think in 5 pieces: base rate, shift differentials, schedule reality, overtime expectations, and meaningful perks. You hit those 5, you're already way ahead of a generic, "It pays $18 an hour, are you interested?"
Let's break those down quickly. First, base rate. This is the obvious one. What shows up on the job posting? The key is being straightforward. If there's a training rate that changes after 30 days, say that clearly instead of letting people discover it on the floor.
Second, shift differentials. A lot of warehouses and plants offer an extra $1 or $2 for evenings or nights. Don't just say, there's a shift diff. Spell it out. Base is $18 an hour. If you're on second shift, that's $19. Third shift is $19.50. That helps candidates understand why a less popular shift might actually feel better on their check.
Third, schedule reality. Not the ideal schedule on the wall, what actually happens in a normal week. Is it really 40 hours most weeks? Do start times move around? Is there a seasonal slow period where hours dip? Saying, we aim for full-time, but you might see 32 to 36 hours some weeks is more helpful than promising full-time and hoping for the best.
Fourth, overtime expectations. Some jobs quietly expect a lot of overtime but never call it that. Or the opposite. People assume tons of overtime and then get disappointed when it isn't there. A simple line like, overtime is optional and usually offered 2 to 3 times a month, or we're in busy season, expect 10 to 15 hours of overtime most weeks, sets a clear picture.
And finally, meaningful perks. In industrial staffing, perks aren't just ping pong tables and free snacks. A predictable start time every day is a perk. Paid training is a perk. A set schedule that lets someone share a car or handle school drop-off on time. That is a huge perk. If your site offers anything that makes life smoother on the floor, connect that to the real value of the job.
Exactly. Instead of just saying, benefits available, say, you'll know your schedule 2 weeks in advance, and we train on-site, so you're paid while you learn new equipment. That's real pay value that doesn't just show up in the rate.
Now, how we talk about all this really matters. Let's get into some examples of clear versus confusing pay conversations in job orders, postings, and those first recruiter calls.
Let me start with a posting line I see all the time. Up to $20 an hour. Sounds exciting. The problem? Up to usually means one person on third shift with rare overtime actually hits that. Everyone else is sitting closer to 16 or 17 and feeling misled.
A clearer version would be something like, most new hires start between $16 and $18 an hour, depending on shift and experience. Top performers on overnight shifts can earn up to $20. Same information, but now expectations are grounded in reality.
Another confusing line I hear on phone screens is, it's full-time hours, lots of overtime available. That's so vague. Instead, I coach recruiters to say, the base schedule is 40 hours, Monday through Friday. Right now, we're averaging about 8 to 10 hours of overtime per week, and it's strongly encouraged during busy season. Now a candidate can imagine their week.
I also encourage avoiding phrases like, it depends, we'll see, when someone asks about hours or overtime. Of course, it always depends to some extent, but you can still give a typical range. Try, it can vary, but most people in this role are getting between 38 and 42 hours a week, instead of leaving them guessing.
And here's a positive example for job orders from hiring managers. Instead of, we just need people at $17 an hour, a clearer ask would be, we're hiring for a $17 base rate on first shift. There's a $1 shift diff on nights. Employees typically get 38 to 40 hours with occasional Saturday overtime. We want that explained up front. That gives your staffing partner the language to sell the role honestly.
Language matters, even small tweaks. Swapping potential overtime for occasional overtime or frequent overtime makes a big difference in how candidates picture their paycheck and their life outside of work.
All right, let's flip the lens. If you're a job seeker listening right now, how do you compare two roles without getting overwhelmed by details or doing a bunch of math?
Start with a mindset shift. You are not just comparing rates, you're comparing weeks. Imagine your typical week at each job. What time are you leaving home? How long are you on your feet? How often is your schedule changing? That picture will tell you a lot about how that paycheck will actually feel.
And you don't have to grill the recruiter. You can ask simple, neutral questions. For example, on a normal week, how many hours do people in this role actually work? Or is overtime usually optional or expected? You're not arguing. You're just asking for the real pattern.
I'd add a commute question. In industrial work, a higher rate that's 45 minutes away might feel worse than a slightly lower rate that's 15 minutes away. So try something like, what are the typical start and end times? Then picture that drive in traffic. If the commute makes every day stressful, that impacts how you experience that pay.
Another good one is about shift stability. Does the shift ever change, or is it locked in? Some people love rotating shifts. Others absolutely don't. Knowing if you'll flip from days to nights every few weeks can change whether the job feels sustainable.
And think about growth. You can simply ask, have other people in this role moved up or gotten raises? What does that usually look like? You're not asking for a promise, you're just asking for a real story. If the answer is, yeah, we've had folks move from general labor to machine operator after a few months, that means your real pay could change over time with training and experience.
While you're asking those questions, listen not just to the words, but to the clarity. If someone can explain hours, overtime, and shift in a calm, specific way, that's a good sign the job is run in a fairly organized way. If every answer is, it just depends, we'll see, that might be a hint that reality on the floor is pretty chaotic.
And again, this is not about building the perfect spreadsheet or doing advanced calculations. It's about getting a simple, honest picture of your week so that when that first check hits, it feels like what you expected, not a surprise in either direction.
Let's land this with a couple of quick action steps. One for employers and staffing pros, and one for job seekers.
If you're an employer or recruiter, here's your one change. In your next pay conversation or job posting, add one concrete sentence about schedule and hours. For example, most people in this role work 40 hours a week on a consistent shift, with occasional Saturday overtime during busy season. That one sentence sets a much clearer expectation than just quoting a rate.
If you're a job seeker, here's your one question to ask before you say yes. On a normal week, what does my schedule and hours usually look like in this role? Then listen carefully. If the answer still feels fuzzy, ask one follow-up about overtime or shift stability. You deserve to know what your week will really feel like.
Let's do a quick recap of the 3 big ideas from today. First, hourly rate is just the headline. Real pay is shaped by consistent hours, shift, commute, overtime expectations, and growth potential.
Second, employers and staffing pros can build trust and reduce turnover by explaining compensation in 5 parts: base rate, shift differentials, schedule reality, overtime expectations, and meaningful perks like predictable schedules and paid training.
And third, job seekers don't need complex math to compare offers. A few clear questions about hours, shift stability, commute, and growth can help you choose the job that truly works for your life, not just the one with the flashiest rate.
Thanks for joining us on Workers.com, Staffing Pulse, Insights from the Front Line.
Until next time.